Planning Director's report on Planning Commission actions. Charlie.
All right, the Planning Commission held their regular meeting on July 24th, and this is my report to you on what they did at that meeting. The appeal period is 15 days after the date of that meeting, which I believe is tomorrow, or I'm sorry, this coming Friday, the 8th. They had the election of officers for the next year. They elected Sean Moss as chair and Kyrie Tan as vice chair. They considered the East Bay Bridge facade improvements. Oh, I should note that Commissioner Coomerly had an excused absence from the meeting. They approved the East Bay Bridge facade improvements on a 5-to-1 vote, with Commissioner Moss, or now Chair Moss, voting no. On the Park on Powell sign, there were 2 items related to the Park on Powell, formerly known as Parkside Apartments, signage, and Commissioner Gunkel was recused on both of those because he owns his home within 500 feet. The master sign program was approved on a 5-to-0 vote, and the Park on Powell project identification signage was approved on a 4-to-1 vote, with Commissioner Donaldson voting no. They also held a study session on the Christie Avenue Park redesign and expansion, and they made a number of good comments. The main takeaway that I got from that was that they want to see a real play structure in the park and not berms and rocks for kids to climb on. So that concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
I just want to comment on the name change from Paper Mill to Parkside to Park on Powell. And I have to say, when I first looked at this, I had no idea what it was about. And how there's another project, the intersection, that has been renamed, and I heard about, or Emmy, I think. And I was like, I've never heard of that project in Emeryville. How could you not know that, Councilmember West? So I'm just curious how we become aware of these things, except by random exposure. Is there any, by reading the progress reports, are the name changes in there as well?
They are. Staff often scratches our heads and say we wish we had veto power, or at least some say over what they name these projects. Actually, we did have a little bit of that with the Park on Powell project. They initially were going to call it 1333 Powell, which is problematic because there's actually 3 buildings and they have 4 different addresses, and the fire department thought that would be confusing. So they essentially vetoed that, and that's how it ended up being Park on Powell. But ordinarily, we have no say. What generally happens is about halfway through the construction of a major project, especially a residential one, the marketing people get involved, and then they give the project a different name than it ever had before. So that's when
what we're seeing.
That's
okay.
when you can expect a new name, is when the project is about halfway constructed.
I'm just glad they used a C instead of a K, or people would be looking for the intersection of Park and Powell.
Or they would
that
be
C is really important.
Or they'd be looking for the Park on Powell, or they'd be looking for some place to park on Powell.
Very ambiguous.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I did want to say, if we're done with that item.
Yeah.
Okay. I meant to do